Hello, that was a little bit hairy. I didn't realize that you can't live stream from Safari until I started the stream, so I'm on Chrome now. Hopefully this will work. Looks like it's working anyway. We'll see if anybody comes in to join me or if I'm all by myself here. I'm just checking out my messages on my phone. People going, where are you? I don't see you yet. Okay, I'm here now. So I'm the only one in this stream. I guess I'll just wait until I know there's people watching. Someone just popped in. Be sure that you say hi over in the chat box because I've never done this before and I don't actually know if I'll be able to see who's in the stream unless you say something. So other than that, I just know there's a little counter up at the top that tells me how many people are on. Right now, there's just 2 of us, all by our lonesome. I'll type in the chat box. People can feel free to ask any questions, shoot the breeze, because this is a way to just have undivided time where we can actually talk about projects and hiding out from the coronavirus. And that's why I'm doing this as a bed chat, because I've seen that as kind of a trend on the internet, people chatting from their houses and specifically from their beds. So this is the quietest room in my house, and I just decided instead of my dining room with my sewing machine, I would sit in my bed and chat. So here I am. All right, let me see who else is beeping me on my phone. Yeah. More people going, I can't find you. Anyway, so I thought I would do this just to kind of talk through what we're going to do with the next 4 to 6 weeks. I have gotten questions from people in California, in Washington State, in New York City, in the surrounding areas, anybody who's basically been put under quarantine and who's kids at school, asking, what do we do with ourselves? Because this is kind of unprecedented. Of course, it's what all of us did with ourselves in the 70s when most of us lived this way without the internet, without phones, without devices, without video games. I mean, when I was a kid, Pong was new. So that should tell you something. So we had to keep ourselves busy with a lot of outdoor activities and climbing trees and going for walks and such. But with the nature of this quarantine, it means that you have to avoid places where a lot of people congregate. I just got a message from our local municipality, that's a little hard to say, telling us that basically you need to use the delivery services for groceries. And we've only had 1 confirmed case here in Alabama so far, but everybody's being super cautious. Our YMCA canceled all the classes, group classes, and they're telling you basically you're on your own if you come in by yourself because you're going to have to clean up everything to make sure you don't get sick. So that gives us a whole lot of time on our hands. Oh, and our church has canceled services for the next 2 weeks. So Sundays are going to be long, slow days. And I'm just actually excited about it because I have so many things to do. So we're looking forward to the Jane Austen Festival in July in Louisville. And I've got to make clothes for, let's see, I've got most of an outfit for my younger twin, my 14-year-old. I have nothing for his twin. So we've got to literally make him breeches, tailcoat, shirt, everything. I need to make my husband another outfit, both for the Governor's Garden Party in Colonial Williamsburg and for the Jane Austen Festival. And I have dresses for my little girls, but they're not really sturdy play dresses. They're more like really nice embroidered muslin, and I don't want to use those when we're going to be doing a lot of hard play. So I need to make play dresses for them. The good thing is that both of my daughters like to sew, and they've both said that they will help me. I'm holding them to that because we have a whole lot to do. So this is a really good resource. Everyday Dress of Rural America, 1783 to 1800. because it actually not only has very nice sketches of what people wore, but it has, and the back. So there you get to see the back seams. It also has them graphed as patterns. So there you go, bodice and sleeve. Skirt, of course, is just basically rectangles that are gathered. Hi, Jennie. It's my friend Jennifer from Canada. She lives way up in the Northwest Territories, so it's always nice to see her. Not literally. I wish I could see her literally, but she's really far away. Anyway, so I've got to make little boy shirts. So I'm going from the shirt diagrams in this book, because you don't actually need to buy a pattern to make a simple colonial era or Regency era shirt. That's what these look like. It's very basic. So the nice thing about a gridded pattern is that you can size it up to fit the person that you're sewing for. You can scale it. That is my old-fashioned phone ringing in the hall, and nobody has our number, so that means it's a spam caller, and I'm going to ignore it. Anyway, so that's a really good book. That's a good resource if you're looking to jump into historical costuming and you don't want to lay out a lot of money on patterns. This is from Dover, and Dover reprints a lot of these and keeps them in print. So this is a good one to have on hand. It's even got a chemise à la reine, and it explains the fabrics that were used and the context in which these things were worn, who would have worn them, etc. You've got basic work gowns. So again, this is rural America. So this is people living in the colonies, basically in the hinterlands like West Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee, Ohio. They're not going to have all the access to the latest fashions that people are wearing, like Dolly Madison in Washington. They're going to be wearing, far more practical clothes. So we're going to be in practical clothes because it's going to be summer and hot, and they're going to be running around in the grass, and I need things that they can wear. Does the book show how to scale up or down the grid patterns? Okay, basically this, excuse my southern accent, these are 1-inch grids. So each tiny block is 1 inch. So you can just take it into someplace like a Staples or even the UPS store and have them scan it and then scale it up. And all they have to do is, it's a simple mathematical equation. You measure the actual block and then you do the math to figure out how far up it needs to be exploded to go, hi, nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. So I'm just explaining how to size up gridded patterns from a book that's got them. Janet Arnold, of course, has gridded patterns. Now, another thing you can do if you're handy with pencil or pen or chalk or whatever is to buy that interfacing that Joann's carries and Michael's carries that already has a 1-inch grid on it. I should have thought to bring that, but I'm sitting in my bed and I'd have to get up and actually go find it. But anyway, it's like a light blue grid printed on interfacing. And then what you do is you put your book open to your grid like that. And using a ruler and measuring tape and pencil, you just copy the lines. You count like, okay, let's say this is 23 inches long. Then you draw your line through 23 of the squares on your grid before you make the curve, and you can basically match it block for block if you want to do that. It does take a long time because you're literally having to draw this onto the larger grid. But if you don't have access to a large format printer, that's the best way to do it. And I know a lot of us don't. I mean, here it's ridiculously expensive to go to Staples and have them blow something like this up because they charge by the foot. My printer in the UK is incredibly cheap compared to here, but I'm not going to send him stuff and then have him ship it to me. So yeah, 1-inch grid interfacing is a great idea. This is another excellent resource. This is Costume in Detail by Nancy Bradfield, which is one of my very favorites going back to college. And what I love about her drawings is how incredibly detailed they are. So these are various chemisettes and basques. A basque would have been worn over a bodice, and a chemisette goes under a bodice. So this one would have been worn over top. And you see these in paintings. I actually did this in my presentation last month in Florida. I had paintings where they're wearing a basque over top of a Regency gown. It's not as common in paintings as a chemisette, but you still see it from time to time. So this is a true chemisette. Notice it has no sleeves because this goes underneath the neckline of the gown and just provides that extra layer. Jane Austen in her letters called them a bosom friend because they keep your chest warm in winter, or they keep you from getting sunburned in the summer. So that's handy. What I like about Nancy's book, I'm going to see if I can find it. Yeah. This is one of her drawings of answered. And if you have any questions about how did they tie these things up, how were they fastened, how did they keep them in place, she's got all the interior details. So here's the tape that's sewn into this inside of the center back of the Spencer jacket, which you would have wrapped around your waist and tied in front before closing the front up with another tie or waistband. So this gives you those kind of little helpful details. Janet Arnold does the same thing. So when I designed the Elegant Ladies Closet pattern, I knew I wanted to do a drawstring dress because my first pattern was buttons. It buttoned up the back, but a drawstring dress will slip on and you can tie it yourself. It makes it much easier. And I found the details for how to do those drawstrings in Janet Arnold and in Nancy Bradfield. In fact, I'm going to show you another one of her gowns that has that detail. Well, here's one. This is not like mine because this one is open in the back. Let's see if you can see that. Okay, so this is literally, it ties at the neck and it ties at the waist, but there's a gap. No one cared about the gap because you're wearing a chemise and stays underneath and a petticoat over that. So no, there's nothing to see. Nobody had any misgivings about wearing something that was slightly open in the back. Oh, hi, Kelsey. Cheshire Vintage, hello. I'm so glad you made it. Oh, it's so nice to see people dropping in. We're just chatting about some of my very favorite resources, my books that are my go-tos when I'm planning new costumes to figure out how did they do things. Because I've gotten to go and see gowns in storage in places like Hampshire and Hereford and Nottingham and London, and that's an amazing experience to actually have the gown in front of you and have the docent open it up and explain this is how it tied, or this is how it fastened, or this is how they sewed a particular seam. But that's not something you can do every day unless you like live in London and you know the docent or the curator and you go in. So these books are pure treasure. Nancy Bradfield, I've thumbed this book through so many times the pages are all bent up because you get super duper details. Like here's this one, which I also put in my Regency gown pattern. When you have a long sleeve that goes past the wrist and rests right along the knuckles, you put a little sleeve band to tie that. There it is. There's a sleeve band and there's the button. And I've got this in my Regency gown pattern. I explain how to do that. No one from the US is going there this week. Right. That's the point. We're all here in quarantine and we're not allowed to go anywhere pretty much. So we're going to batten down the hatches and do what we can from home. And if your libraries are still open, and I'm sure they are, our library is still open, interlibrary loan, you can get all these things. That's how I first got Janet Arnold. I couldn't find them for sale anywhere and there was no Amazon. So I used interlibrary loan like a mad woman. Anyway, so that's a wonderful detail there. Let me find this other dress that's got the drawstring. It goes around the back. Okay, well, here's one with buttons. It's one of the first criticisms I got when I put out my first pattern was they didn't button up the back. Nobody did that. And I've learned never to say nobody did something because then you'll find a dress that does that. So, hi, Marty. Oh, it's awesome. People are sewing. I'm so happy about that part of this enforced quarantine is that people are just digging into their creativity and saying, you know what? I've got plenty to do. I'm kind of smiling at all the parents whose kids are off school and they're like, no, we have 4 weeks off school because homeschoolers never get 4 weeks off school. It doesn't matter if everybody goes into quarantine. We're still doing school. Of course, we do have spring break next week, so my kids are happy about that. Okay. So here, is a bib front gown. So that's one. This is where my bib front instructions basically were inspired. If you go to my website under tips, I've got 2 sets of instructions. The first one I made for an apron front gown, I really was going on a hunch, like what I had seen in a couple of books or photos. But that was at the point, 1998, I hadn't seen a lot of stuff up close. So the second time I did a bib front gown was 2015. Yeah, 2015 when I was in South Africa. And by that point, I'd actually seen several in person in museums. And then I also had this wonderful illustration because my books had finally made it to South Africa. We'd had to leave them in Kenya at one point, so I was without them for 3 years. But these are those 2 tabs that cross over the front. We call them lining in the pattern, because that's what they were called, but they're really not lining. They're just to cover the line of the stays. And then you've got the drawstring that ties to hold the skirt back. You know how in the Empire, because it's not your true waistline, you don't in your normal waistline, you've got this nice little dent, your hourglass. Even if you're pear-shaped, you still have a bit of a dent at the waist. But the Empire waist hits under the bust. So what happens is you can get nice and fitted through the bust, but right where your back sways, you tend to have a tent effect where the gown just kind of hangs from the shoulders to your derriere. And it ends up, what they did in the early Regency is they padded that area. They would wear a little pad or they'd sew it into the back of the dress to fill out that little slump in the back of the gown. Later, what they did is they put ties at the center back that came under the bust and cinched, because that pulls the back of the gown right up to your back. So you end up with that nice line instead of a tent, which is kind of, like 18th century English gown. Let me look at the chat. Yeah, homeschoolers have been training for quarantine forever, so we know what we're doing. How do you manage juggling homeschooling, traveling, and owning a business? I was homeschooled and have been helping school my younger brothers. Well, bravo to you for helping your mom. That is actually a huge secret, is the older kids helping the younger kids. When my parents homeschooled me, so I'm a homeschool grad myself. My husband's a homeschool grad. And the reason my parents chose to do it is that my dad traveled abroad as a pilot and an aviation historian. He wrote 59 books before he died. He wrote thousands of magazine articles. He was on the Discovery Channel. He flew the airshow circuits. And at one point, my dad was like, you know what? It's far more educational for the kids to go with us when we go around the world and see these things. So they took us out of school for a year to just try it. And we never went back, because it is a better education to actually see the world up close and interview people like Jimmy Doolittle, who I didn't appreciate when I was 10 years old. I'm sorry. I really didn't understand who he was. But anyway, my brother was really gifted in math, and I was not. And I was really gifted in writing, and he was not. And he was 2 years younger than me, and my mom was jumping him ahead of me in math, which made me mad. But she said, well, honey, that's just not your strength. So how about if you tutor your brother in his writing and grammar, and he can tutor you in math? Well, when I was about 13 or 14, that galled me. I didn't like it one bit, but he did help me. And I don't think I would have made it through high school quite as well as I did without his assistance, because he has a knack for explaining math that I don't. Thank goodness for online stuff like Khan Academy, because honestly, that's still not my thing. I can do it, but it's not my favorite thing. But anyway, I digress. So when we went to college, my brother was a year behind me. And for some crazy reason, they had mixed up my records with another student, and they jumped me into advanced math, and they jumped her into advanced English. And I was floundering. There was no way I was going to pass the math level they put me in. And my brother came to the rescue. He tutored me through 3 years of college math, and I graduated with a B. And I was very thankful, because I never would have made it. And so that's kind of how it works with homeschooling. Is my mom has always reminded me, there's 3 things you're trying to do: teach them to read, teach them to think, teach them to communicate. If you can read and comprehend, you can think about something logically, and then you can communicate it to another person, you can learn anything. And there's nothing on the planet to stand in your way. Just find the thing that's your passion and learn about it. And there's no excuse now, because everything's online. I mean, you've got the great courses on Amazon. You've got tons of free stuff from PBS. You've got all the things on YouTube. And they're credible things. They're not just, some guy in his basement telling you about World War II, although there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of passion on it on the internet. But there's so many, many, many resources out there. And all my kids have different learning styles, just like I had a different learning style from my brother, and my sister had a different learning style from the both of us. And my brother graduated high school when he was 15 and went to college at 16. I graduated from high school at 17, sat home for a year helping my dad with his research. And then I went to college at 19, because I actually didn't want to go at all. And in retrospect, I think I would have skipped it. But yeah, so the balancing act is, first of all, we don't school at home. I don't have a room with school books and a chalkboard and a flag. I don't stand at the front of the room and lecture. We've let go of the school model, because that's very 19th century. And there's a wonderful TED Talk, the best TED Talk you can ever watch, even if you have no desire to homeschool, just to help you rethink how we learn, is The School in the Cloud. Write that down. and then Google it and go watch it. It's not, I think it's about a 45-minute talk. It's an Indian fellow who has helped establish the school in the cloud in India, where they literally put up a kiosk with a computer and they just leave the kids to figure it out. And they speak English, computers are niche. So the first thing the kids do is they teach themselves how to speak and read English. Kids are smart. They can do these things. And the awesome thing about homeschooling is when you find a passion, something that they really love, you can run with it. There is no need to drag them through. No, I'm sorry. Right now we're on ancient Egypt. There's no way we're going to skip ahead to whatever it is you're passionate about. No, if someone finds something that really sparks their interest, we will just hit the pause button on whatever we're on in history or science and run after that thing and let them really get into it. And sometimes it's like they slake the thirst for that particular piece of information and they're like, yeah, okay, I'm done. That was enough of that. But other times it becomes a passion. Like my oldest son got into computers when he was 12, and he is now an amazing IT guy. He designs websites. He does a lot of back-end stuff, and he's working for himself and living in South Africa and is very, very happy, and he's doing what he loves. So I think it's all about rethinking what we mean by education. If you mean filling a bucket full of knowledge, I'm not interested in that, because we can all become really good at trivial pursuit, but that's not the goal of education. It's to become good at life. And what do we need to do in life? We need to have relationships with other people. We need to communicate well. We need to be kind. We need to serve others, and we need to do things that make the world a better place. And there are many, many ways to do that that don't involve sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day. End of lecture. Okay, let me check the chats. Love Khan Academy. Yes, Jen, we love Khan Academy too. We also love Always Ice Cream for girls and Clever Dragons for boys. And yes, they do separate them. I think that's more for online safety than anything else. And they have tons of videos on every known topic level, and my kids love them. And as they learn, they earn coins, and they can spend the coins in a little online store to decorate their little house or to buy clothes for their avatar and trade games with other kids. So there's so many fun resources online that can help you with homeschooling. Soul sister. Yay! There's lots of us out here, lots of soul sisters. Use your placket video every time I need to sew one. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, plackets took me a long time to learn. That was one of the trip-uppiest things when my mom taught me to sew, besides zippers, was plackets, because it's okay to start at the top, but when you get to that point where you've got to just taper to nothing and then go up the other side, it's hair-raising. It's still hair-raising. I still use my seam ripper, so yeah, you're in good company. Nanya says, I've seen that TED Talk was amazing. He won lots of awards and lots of money. Yes, and he's used that money really well. He's incredible. I can't remember what his name is, and I hate to say it because if I guess wrong, I'll feel like an idiot. It's an Indian name. But anyway, The School in the Cloud, best talk ever. And it isn't even about homeschooling. It's just about how we need to break ourselves out of the mindset of 19th century education, which was designed for the British Empire so that you could put cogs in the machine at any point in the empire and they would function in the same way. Well, the world doesn't work like that anymore. We don't need billions of the exact same person. We need creative people who are willing to try things and risk things. And that's what I believe. That's where homeschooling comes in. Okay, anyway, so we're going over some of my favorite resources. I already talked about this one. This is Everyday Dress of Rural America, and it has gridded patterns inside. So if you don't want to lay out a lot of money for new patterns to try something, try a book with grids. And like I said, you can either take it to Staples and have them enlarge it for you, or you can buy the gridded interfacing and just draw it out. It is time consuming, a little bit tedious, but it does work. And I've done it before, particularly for kids' clothes, because remember that you can use that 1-inch grid to scale up or down. So the nice thing about Janet Arnold is she tells you, in fact, hold on a second. I'm going to hop up and grab my Janet Arnold because I can see it on the top of my sewing shelf as I disentangle myself from all these wires. Hey. I get to see my pillows. This is my bed chat. Okay, so this is my favorite Janet Arnold. It's the one I've used the most because this is my favorite time period. This is where stuff fits in for Regency, and ta-da! In all its glory, every single piece is laid out on a grid and explained. Okay, so that's 1820s. And what Janet Arnold does is she gives you the measurements of the original garment, because these are all garments that she studied in museums. See, like here she's laid it out to show you what the inside looks like and how it functioned and how it fastened. which is super helpful. So for instance, if you know that the gown that she's talking about had an underbust measurement of, let's say, 30, and your underbust measurement is 32, then you know you've got to size it up to add those 2 inches. And I have a whole tutorial under my tips on my website that tells you how to size any pattern up. So if you don't want to do the mental math while redrawing a gridded pattern or taking it to be sized up, then you can simply just enlarge it exactly to the scale it already is and then size it up afterwards. And I have a step-by-step tutorial that explains where you split the pattern and how you divide it, or if you need to shrink it. Same thing, you're going in reverse. So let me see if I can find what I wanted to show you, because this was hugely inspiring for my Elegant Ladies Closet pattern. Okay, so that crossover robe, this is like a house dress that you would wear over another gown. So this is like your morning dress when you're having breakfast or coffee. You might have your lady visitors over and it's casual. If you've seen the 1994 version of Persuasion with Amanda Root, the one who plays her sister, she's actually Emma Thompson's real sister in real life. At one point, she wears a short gown that's this length, but it has long sleeves. It's when she's lounging on the couch and says she's so sick, so ill that she could hardly speak. She's wearing a gown like this that's an at-home dress. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. No, I've gone back too far. Go the other way. So that's where the crossover inspiration came from. Hello. Aw, it's so nice to see all these comments. This is great. Oh, this is fun. Okay, so a riding habit, and yes, I gotta have a riding habit one of these days. I don't know where I'm gonna wear it. I don't ride horses anymore. I used to as a kid. The fun thing about a riding habit is that this bit underneath, and I photographed one in Nottingham 3 years ago, it's literally just a skirt with straps. That's all. It's like a petticoat, but you make it out of the same fabric as the habit jacket. So those are easy to do. In fact, you could make it dual purpose and the skirt could just be worn under a short gown. Okay, I'm trying to find the one that shows the ties in the back. Yep, here it is. Okay, so this is another bib front gown. This is why I love the details of these things. You could totally just wear it at home. Yeah, you could history bound in these things. Those short gowns are so comfy. It's like basically a half bathrobe. So if you've got your long nightgown on, you throw it on in the morning and you look pretty decent. In fact, you look fabulous. And if you follow me on Instagram, go follow Noodle Stitch, because she's, is it Noodle Stitch? And Penny River Costumes, because they've been talking about how since we all have to stay home and not go anywhere and not gather in crowds, let's just dress fabulously anyway. So here I am in my very 1950s black dress in my bed. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm still dressed up. Well, it's because I have to finish my YouTube video today, and this is what I was wearing when I started filming, so I figure I'll keep it consistent. But anyway, dress up, even if you're not going anywhere, even if you're just running to the grocery store to get toilet paper, or whatever else everybody's buying. Yeah, wear it. Okay, so here is another bib front gown. And what Arnold shows you is how the ties from the front apron, okay, so this literally, here's the crisscrossy inside of the front that goes over your stays and your petticoat. This apron bit comes up in buttons here and here, like this. And then the tie comes from the waistline seam and goes around the back of the dress and feeds through a loop. And a lot of people leave off this step in my pattern, and don't leave it off, because if you do not run the tie through a loop, what happens is your waistline ties sink down to your natural waist. And you don't want that, because then you end up with this funny poof right here where your tie has gone down and captured the fullness of the back of the dress. And you want the tie firmly in your center back. That's what the loops are for. Now, in this book, her loops are at these curved side seams, which are much closer here to here. Mine has a side seam under here. This is the curved side back. On my dress, they come closer to the center back, and it actually helps really anchor it higher up above that natural curve. Okay, let me look at the chat. Don't have anything to dress up in. Well, that's fine. That's fine too. You don't have to go fancy, but if you've got something or you have an itch to make something, you don't need an occasion to make it. You really don't. When we lived in rural Virginia, we did have reenactments we could go to, but they were few and far between, like once or twice a year. So I wasn't going to go to the grocery store in hoop skirts because those were all antebellum events. And I definitely wore those to the grocery store. And it was always kind of fun because I would put my hair all up in a Regency style, curls all on top. I would run ribbons between or pearls. And then I'd be wearing a very Emma or Sense and Sensibility looking dress. That's why my company's named Sense and Sensibility, by the way. And I'd go in the grocery store and the little old men would stop and hold the door for me and say, "Oh, you just look like a breath of fresh air." It always made my heart feel so good. How can I start wearing cute historical history bounding things? I'm just starting out. Okay, if you're just starting out and you don't say how new you are to sewing or anything. If you've never sewn a stitch and you want a history bound, thrift, because you can find so many cool skirts and blouses and vests that have that look of history, and you just put them together in a way. Like watch Bernadette Banner's channel, where because she dresses kind of like a Victorian lady every day in her tweed vest and her overcoats and everything. You can find things that look a lot like that just by thrifting. I've found amazing things at our local thrift store, everything from real vintage to just vintage-esque. And I remember when I was a teenager in the 80s, there was a huge kind of movement back to retro Victorian. So you had companies like Gunny Sacks, you had Jessica McClintock, who did all those very Victorian looking gowns. You can find those thrifted now for like $5, $10, and then just start feeding that into your wardrobe. The way you make it history bounding is that you don't try to make it 100% like something out of a Victorian or Edwardian picture. You throw in your modern earrings or your modern hairstyle or a scarf or something else to make it very you and very now, but you're still echoing something from the past. And you can do that with a skirt and with a blouse and with a vest, which is great fun. Yes, watch Rachel Matsky is awesome. I love her channel. Watch Morgan Donner. She does history bounding. She has a very funny video about what does history bounding mean, because she's the one who coined the term. And it shows her in the first part of it going out in public dressed completely in medieval dress and not having people give her funny looks. And then she shows how to kind of bleed it back to where you're not full on medieval or Regency or whatever, but you're echoing that time period and you're doing it with your own sense of style. I've never sewn, but I'll definitely try thrifting. Yes, definitely. And here's another one to follow. On Instagram or on YouTube, follow Evelyn Wood. She's from Australia. She is the most gifted refashioning expert I've ever seen. And she dresses basically 30s, 40s all the time. She is a wonderful, enthusiastic person to watch. She does Mending Monday, where you bring out whatever it is you got to fix and you showcase it on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you are. And she really advocates not throwing things away, but mending and refreshing. So what she'll do is she'll go and buy like a gentleman's shirt or a really hideously ugly dress from the 70s or 80s, and she will refashion it into something that looks vintage. And it's incredible what she does with these things. You just can't believe it. You're looking at that like, I can't believe that was actually the hideous thing in the before photo, because it's incredible what she does. Thrift stores are life for history bounding. Yes, 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 yes. Plus, you're thrifting. You're not buying something that was made on the cheap and, you know, is probably going to fall apart. That's the thing I love about thrifted clothes, particularly the older ones that are so well made, is that they're going to last you a very long time. I also feel less guilty buying thrifted clothes for my kids because, you know, kids outgrow, you hand down to the next kid. Sometimes they wear it out and it turns into a scrap for the rag bag, but you don't have the same guilt factor that you do when you're buying super cheaply made clothes that are going to wear out after one child, and you really can't pass them down because there's holes everywhere. Monday mending totally motivated me to patch my PJs and get a fire lit under my butt to sew a few more because I always wear them out before I can sew new ones. Yes. Yeah. So it's like in World War II, that whole thing of make, do, and mend. Low price wool skirts at thrift stores. Yes. Do you know how expensive wool is? When I decided to make myself a winter coat to wear to New York City, I got online. I mean, I knew what wool cost in the UK. I had never bought it there. It's so expensive. I got online and was like, yikes, we're looking at $25 to $30 per yard, and I needed more than 4 yards. And I thought, ouch. Finally, I found Fabric Mart, which has beautiful 100% wool, because the local Joann's, the stuff that they call wool is 90% polyester and 7% wool and 3% I don't know what. It is not real wool. and you're going to sweat in that like the dickens because it's basically like wearing a plastic bag. So I wasn't going to buy that, even though it was substantially cheaper. So I just waited and I pounced on a sale from Fabric Mart, and you can follow them on Instagram as well. Their let's see, their web address I think is Fabric Mart Shop or Fabric Mart Store. It's not just fabricmart.com, but you can Google them. They have really nice wools, and I just bought wool for my husband's new Georgian suit, so that's exciting. But yeah, if you go to a thrift store and you find a really nice wool jacket that doesn't quite fit, you can tailor it and refashion it to fit, and you are not going to be able to buy just the fabric for the price that you'll pay at a thrift store. If you wanted to make it from scratch, you'd pay a whole lot more. We barely have mills anymore. Yeah, exactly. We're not milling fabric in the United States like we used to. I just found out there's a company in Alabama called the Red Cotton Company. They grow the cotton here. They harvest it. They do all of the combing and milling and everything, and they make their own fabric, and then they produce sheets. Now, a sheet set is like $185. So I haven't quite gone all the way as to buying a sheet set from them. But it's still amazing. I'm really glad that people are getting back to actually growing and going all the way through the process of making the final end product. I think that's really where we should be. I think one of the reasons we're all a little bit worried about this financial crisis that's being caused by this pandemic is the fact that our supply chain is so intertwined in China, and it's cheap junk. And when you get used to buying cheap junk, it hurts to think of actually paying what things really cost. And it is very costly to grow, harvest, refine, and make the fabric and produce the end garment. That's a lot of steps. Okay, let me see what else. Sounds like a homeschool co-op field trip. Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I'm going to bring that up with my homeschool mom friends. Favorite fashion time period around 1890 to 1910, 1940s, big difference. But what things can I make or buy that could be used for both? Do they exist? Underclothes, petticoats, vests, anything? Well, there's quite a vast difference between 1910 and 1940. There's not as vast a difference between 1900 and 1910. So you can, in fact, I'm going to guilt trip myself. I have an under things pattern that runs from about 1898 to 1912. It's not out yet. All the pieces are on the sheets. They were sent to the printer a long time ago, but I started writing the instructions. I had gotten as far as inking in all the illustrations and scanning them, and my computer crashed in Kenya, and I lost the whole thing. I lost all the instructions, all the drawings, and the hand drawings had long since gone because I'd scanned them. I figured I didn't need them anymore. That's why I back up all the time. So yeah, that needs to come out. But there are other good under things patterns from folkwear, from past patterns. So if you make something like a petticoat, corset cover, and drawers for 1900, they will work all the way through the 19 teens because it changed very little. The next drastic change in silhouette is around 1918, 1919, when clothing got much more practical because of World War I. And so that's when you see the silhouette slimming down and kind of becoming flat leading up to the 1920s when everything just went flat. Okay, let's see. Could vests work from 1910 to 1940s? Yeah, because they were worn. Now the shape is different. Like a vest you'll see in 1900 is going to be very fitted over that corseted silhouette. It's also going to be short. So it's going to come right to the natural waist and then maybe have little points. It's hard to see what I'm showing here. So your vest would hit right here and then might flare out to give that hourglass waist look of the late 1890s. As you move forward into the 19 teens, the vests lengthen, particularly around 1915, 1916. You get the long basques that actually go down over the hips. So it's much longer vests. Cheshire Vintage actually just made a vest and put it on her Instagram. And she drafted the pattern herself. So I'm applauding her. She's right here in the chat with us. And you can go look at it on her Instagram account. You can do that. And it bleeds back to earlier eras, but also works fine for the 1940s, because what you see in the 40s because of World War II and fabric rationing is that women took men's clothes and refashioned them to fit themselves. So it's nothing new. And particularly land girls who were working the farms when the men were overseas fighting, they requisitioned their dad's trousers, vests, shirts, and all they did was tailor them to fit them better so that they weren't swimming in fabric. And then you would save the fabric to use for things like bandanas you could twist your hair up into, scarves, things like that. So yeah, Ooh, man, all that work. Yeah, but it's great work. It's fun work. It's enjoyable work. I love it. And the cool thing about Evelyn's channel is that you're amazed at how a few changes can make a drastic difference in a garment that you've thrifted. So it's not like you're going to buy a dress, take every last stitch of it apart, cut it down, and put it all back together again. Sometimes it's much easier than that. Sometimes it's as simple as shortening a man's shirt so that it'll tie around the waist and give you that natural feminine silhouette. Sometimes it's removing a collar and lowering a neckline to do something different with the neckline. It's not always drastic. And a lot of her refashioning things are like in under an hour. She does a lot of 1 hour dresses. There is a pattern, I want to say it's from Decades of Style. Excuse me, I hope I'm remembering right. For a 1 hour dress, that's a 20s dress. Also, it bleeds back to about 1918. Let me think of what else. I should have brought my water in here because now I'm going to get a cough. Let me find. Okay, I'm going to go refill my water. I'll be right back. Right. Sorry about that. Reality. I didn't drink enough water with my lunch, so now my throat is dry. Anyway, I check out Decades of Style. Check out Lauren's Wearing History. It's wearinghistory.clothing. That's her extension. It's not .com. And she has also a lot of either vintage reprints or then patterns she's drafted based on original vintage designs. And she has dresses that go together in from cutting to sewing, probably more realistically in 2 hours. But the whole thing about feeling intimidated about the amount of time it's going to take you to sew something is just remember, for everything you sew, you attain a skill level that you won't have to do again. So your next project, excuse me, is going to go a lot faster. And the project after that is going to go even faster. So, excuse me, gosh, I really should have thought before I started my live stream. This is another great book, Cut of Women's Clothes. This one runs up to 1930. And while it's not graphed, it is measured. So you have a grid along the side to tell you the length of things. It's really not as easy to use as Janet Arnold, but it's still helpful because this is one thing my mother did when I told her I finally wanted to learn to sew because I'd seen all the dresses in Anne of Green Gables. She said, okay, then you need to learn how to visualize what something looks like laid out flat. So if you admire that sleeve shape, how would it look if you flattened it and went to cut it out? Because my mom could cut out anything without a pattern. She still can. She can look at a dress and just cut based on measurements. I still can't do that. I have to make myself the pattern piece. So books like these, Janet Arnold, Everyday Dress in Rural America, and Nora Waugh's dress. Also, Period Costumes for Stage and Screen by Jean Honeysett, which the text was actually written by my friend Susie Clark. That all also lays out things flat. And what helps you is that you can look at the original garment. So that's, for instance, this chemise à la reine. You can see what this sleeve looks like and then see what the pattern piece looked like. So you know the shape that you're aiming for to get that look. The more you look at these things, the more you study them, the easier it becomes to just go, oh, I know what that sleeve would look like if I cut it out. I know how much fullness I need to achieve a big balloon sleeve, or I know how small of a curve I need to do a set-in sleeve. It just becomes second nature the more you look at it. So it's really, check out the books from the library, get on Pinterest, follow people on Instagram who are doing this type of sewing, and just familiarize yourself with the shapes and the styles. And after a while, you just start to see it. You start to visualize that pattern piece and know what it would do. Okay, 20s is really lovely, but it's too boxy for me. I agree. I'm sorry to all of you who love the flapper look. It's not my look. It doesn't flatter me, and I think it looks like an envelope. I don't think it's very attractive. There are some women who pull it off with the most amazing sense of style, like the The Vintage Egyptologist, go follow her. She's incredible. And Pandora Harrison, her username on Instagram is Pandora Pitstop. Wow. Some people were made to inhabit the 20s because they just carry the look. I don't. I was made to inhabit the 50s. And I do love the Regency as well. For me, the time sink is also just brain fog. Yeah. No, I get that. It is a time sink. If you get trapped in the notion of thinking, I have to finish this today, and I am that person. In fact, the YouTube video I'm editing right now to finish and upload, hopefully by tomorrow, is about this getting stuck because you know what you have to do. You know how many steps there are, and it's just daunting. And so you actually get paralyzed. Like, this is going to take 5 to 10 hours. I don't have that much time today. How could I possibly start if I'm not able to finish? And when I was a kid and my mom was teaching me to sew, I was all about, I want to cut it out this morning and I'm going to wear it tomorrow. Otherwise, I don't want to do it. And mom said, that's just not realistic. Real life isn't ever going to give you that amount of time. I mean, maybe when you're a child, sure, you've got a full afternoon. But when you grow up and you have more responsibilities, you're not going to have that time. So learn to take things into bite-sized chunks. And that's what I'm talking about in my newest video. How do you stack your project so that you break it up into chunks that you can do? In fact, a couple of people on YouTube have just done videos about this very thing. I'm trying to think who. I saw it on Instagram. It's fleeing my mind right now. Someone did a whole thing about sprinting, where if you have 30 minutes today, what one task from this project can you do in those 30 minutes? And be happy that you've used those 30 minutes and not regretful thinking, well, I only did a sleeve, or, well, I only set a zipper. You did a sleeve. You set a zipper. Yay, you. Go. That's one less thing you have to do the next time you have 30 minutes to sit down and sew. Yes, it was costuming drama. She's the one who did it. Thank you, Cheshire. That's exactly who it was. Yep. That was the sprinting video, which is very good. Because you can get trapped into this feeling of, I must start a project and be done, or be 90% of the way done to count it as worthy of the endeavor, worthy of the effort, worthy of the time investment. That's not true. Let me tell you a reason. I knew I was going to wear this wool coat for my trip in New York City. My trip was originally going to be in January, but then the wonderful lady I was going to visit fell and broke her hip. And so we had to postpone until February, which turned out to be fabulous because then I ran into my wonderful friend Zach and a whole bunch of other people that I wouldn't have gotten to see if I'd gone earlier. But because I knew I needed that coat by the time I left, I bought the material when it was on sale in the middle of December. I cut it out after Christmas, during the Christmas break, but I still didn't have the lining. So I had it cut out. I set it aside with all the pattern pieces and stuff, with all the twill tape, everything I was going to need. Then when I found the lining, I bought the lining. When that came in, I took 30 minutes and I cut out the lining, and then I put that away. In the meantime, I was going to this Jane Austen festival in Florida. I needed a new ball gown and I needed a new day dress. Well, okay, need is a thing, but I have worn the same things for the last 10 years. So I decided it was time for something new. Okay, maybe for the last 6 years. It was time for something new. So I had gotten the fabric for the ball gown. I'd gotten this beautiful block print for that beautiful block print for that dress. And I decided, okay, I'm going to pace myself. I know that I'm going to the Jane Austen Festival the first weekend in February. Those are the priority. So even though the coat was cut out, I put it aside. It's ready to sew when I have the time. I made the day dress, which is the quickest one to put together because it's the drawstring gown. It goes together like that. What took the longest was the puffy trim around the hem. But I knew that I didn't have to get that done. If I did, it was a bonus. So once that dress was together, I put it aside and I went for the ball gown. I did the ball gown in basically 3 afternoons. So you break it down into, today, I'm getting the bodice and sleeves done. The next time I'll put the skirt together and I will get that pinned onto the bodice. And then the last time I will actually attach it and I'll put all the trimming on. When you've broken it down into sections like that, it's not as overwhelming. And when you get to the end of your 1 hour or your 2 hours or whatever you had time for that day, you say, I did it. I did what I set out to do today, even if it was just a bodice and sleeves. And that's a good feeling because it's still an accomplishment, even if you don't have a finished dress in front of you. The deadline's out there. You're going to meet that deadline. So don't fuss about it. So I got those 2 dresses done. I sewed the coat together before I left for the festival, knowing that When I came back from the festival, I would have 3 days to finish the coat before leaving for New York City. But I knew I could do it because basically I'd gotten the whole coat together. I'd sewed all of the interfacing to the inside. I'd done the pad stitching. I'd done all of that. It just needed the lining and the hem. So that wasn't nearly as daunting. And when I got back from my trip, I literally sat up one night and did the lining, and then one more night, and I was hemming it 12 hours before my flight. But I got it done. And it didn't, if I had done the project in a day, I would have made that coat right after Christmas. But that wasn't realistic because what happened after Christmas? My website crashed and I had to move to a new platform. So instead of my Christmas break being spent making my Regency gowns and my coat, it was spent moving my entire website off one platform onto another, finding all the lost photos, tweaking all the code, something I totally didn't plan to do and really, frankly, didn't want to do. I would much rather have been sewing. But because I had the time, I had the month and a half that I needed, I didn't panic about it. And I knew the next time I have 2 hours to sew, I will accomplish this. So that's how you do it. It's doing it in bites and not worrying about it. I'm flat filling my shift right now. Are you doing it by hand? More power to you. I haven't flat filled by hand for years. I usually do it on machine because no one's going to see my under things. They won't know it hasn't been hand stitched. It is like knowing you want to do the thing and not having the brain to do it. Yes, it is like swimming through mud. And you know, the only way to get through that is to jump in the mud and start swimming, because there are some tasks that you're so intimidated by and you're so, you just feel like, do I have time to learn how to do this right now? Well, make that one of your time blocks. If it's a skill you don't have yet, set aside your 30 minutes that day or your 1 hour that day and go on YouTube and find the video that walks you through how to do it. And find the tutorial that someone's pinned on Pinterest. It's all out there. It's just finding it. I've got tons of them on my website because every time I got a question of how do I set a placket, I was answering it on an email. And finally I went, you know what? I'll just make a video and put it on YouTube and stick it on my website because it's easier. Someone can find it. It's your relaxing project right now. Yeah, that's great. Flat filling. I like hand sewing, actually. I find hand sewing very relaxing. Especially in the evening when it's quiet, the kids have gone to bed, and I'm literally just sitting in the lamplight. I put on some nice music. I brew a cup of tea, which I hopefully don't spill on whatever I'm flat filling, and then I do my hand sewing. So yeah, I get that. I can't flat fill on machine. My machine doesn't even want to accomplish it. I was working for a competition, and the machine said nope. Haven't machine filled since. Well, hey, if you can do it by hand, do it. It's definitely the right finish for the time period, and more power to you. So there are so many things that you can do by hand that aren't stressful, actually. Like I hem almost everything by hand, unless it's a mid-century dress that it's going to be fine with a machine hem. I just hem by hand because it's one of those relaxing things you can do. It takes you about an hour if you've got a really, really full skirt to go around, and it's just a repetitive motion. So you actually aren't using your brain. Your brain can be listening to a book on tape. Your brain could be actually watching a movie out of the corner of your eye. Okay, true confessions time. How many of you put in something like Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice to watch while you sew, but you really barely glance up at the screen? You're just listening because you've seen it so many times you already know what happens. That's me. I love my machine. It's a Singer. Ooh, nice. Yes. My first machine was my mother's 1964 Singer, which is the last year they made the all-metal gears, and it was a dream to sew on. Podcasts. Yes, podcasts are awesome too, but okay. Oh, so here's the interesting news. So next week, if they don't cancel all flights, I had booked this trip a while ago. My oldest daughter and I are supposed to go to DC and see Alden O'Brien, who is the curator at the Daughters of the American Revolution Museum. And I kept texting her and going, well, you know, what's going to happen? Are they going to close museums? Are we still going to be able to go? Because we were going to go into storage and pull out things, and I was going to put them on my Instagram stories, and I was so excited about that. Then I was going to meet up another friend and go to the American History Museum, and sure enough, they've closed the museums in DC due to coronavirus. So I texted Alden and I said, well, you know, the museums are closed. Do you still want us to come? Because I'm game. If they're not going to cancel flights, I'll still come. I'm not worried. My daughter and I would love to see the cherry blossoms and everything else. And she said, oh, I've got BritBox, Amazon Prime, Netflix, and every known costume movie on DVD. We can just literally sit in my house and binge costume movies for the entire weekend, which sounds great to me. I mean, when do we get time to do that? So yeah. Hubby knows when he comes home and Pride and Prejudice is on pause, it means I've got a fashion show he has to sit through. My husband still can't understand that I don't actually watch movies. Okay, my dad was that person. My late father had every known World War II film, including all the training films, including all the things on how to take apart hydraulic brakes and put them back together. And he had gotten them from years of trolling archives, and he used them as material, research material for his books. But he used to sit, we had a living room, a sunken pit living room. My mom designed the house that we built when I was a kid. And so the living room was down and there was a TV in the brick wall in front. And he would sit in that sunken pit with books all around him and magazines. He would be reading one magazine, thumbing through a book, and have a movie on the screen that he was watching. So, hey, I learned from the best. Although I've given up listening to music and podcasts while I'm working for Lent. Oh, bless you. I gave up chocolate for Lent, which you see has gone very well, considering that my husband for my birthday got me C's candy from California. Yeah, I think that Lenten promise kind of went out the window today, but I'll get back on the train tomorrow. But wow, giving up podcasts for Lent, that's amazing. Let's see what else. Well, we're just all in the same boat together. I think we all enjoy doing the same kinds of things, which is really cool. What was it? What else was I going to share with you guys? There was something else. I actually had a plan that I wrote out last night, and then I don't know what I did with my list. I'm really bad about losing my lists. Oh, thank you for the happy birthday wishes. Yes, I am 48 years old today, and I think it's kind of cool because I'm now counting up to 50, which is half a century. And I have plans to live to at least 100. There's just way too much to do for me to die any sooner. So let's just hope that my mouth to God's ears. I know people have mastered the skill of watching movies and sleeping at the same time and say, don't change the channel. That's epic. Thank you guys. Yeah. Today is my birthday. We actually kind of celebrated last night, but today I told my husband the best birthday present you could get me is it's sunny outside. The rain has stopped. Go take the kids to a park. Let me finish my YouTube video and let me get some sewing done and do a live stream. So yeah, when I'm finished with this live stream, my plan is to go haul out the sewing machine and hopefully finish this YouTube video, which is 8 minutes long right now. Oh, hi, Audrey. Audrey's my friend from Orlando that I got to meet when I was down there. Any sewing machine recommendations that don't break the bank? Old ones. Go buy a vintage machine. The best thing in the world is a Singer Featherweight. That was what my grandmother used. My dad's mom, she was an incredible seamstress. She made copies of French gowns and amazing fashions, and she did it all on her little Singer Featherweight, which folds up and goes in its own little box, and you can travel with it. That's why it was called a featherweight, because compared to other machines, it was much lighter. I think it's still about 15 pounds, but they are workhorses, and they only do a straight stitch, but Singer had all these little attachments that you put on, like the buttonholer, which is pure gold. It makes the prettiest buttonholes you've ever seen in your life. And you just attach it like you do any other thing on the shank. And you put a little template in it for the type of buttonhole you want. And it makes the buttonhole, even with a straight stitch machine. So those are great. I loved my mom's 1964 Singer. Right now, I have a Singer Heritage machine, but it's plastic. And I'm not that happy with it. I got it on a really super steal deal on eBay because my baby lock died when we lived in Kenya. Its motherboard fried, and the cost to fix the motherboard would be as much as a brand new machine. So I just said, forget it. And I just use it for straight stitching and teaching the kids how to sew. But my machine is a newer Singer. I really want to go back to a vintage machine. There's nothing to beat those all metal machines. There's a lady on Instagram, her handle is SBG Machines, and she restores vintage machines, and then they're sold in one of her local thrift shops. But that'll give you a feel for the different models. And they're so easy to fix because they're all metal. I mean, you can take them to a repair shop, like a vacuum and sewing machine repair shop. They'll take it all apart, clean it, oil it, put it all back together, and run like beauty. So you're not looking at motherboards that are going to fry. Now, if you're going to do something really fancy like embroidery and you need the computerized machine, okay, I get that. But for my money, it's a vintage Singer. Yep. Jennifer says the plastic ones just aren't the same. And Claire says, look at garage sales. Absolutely. Definitely. She got a vintage Viking for free. Repairs are about 170 bucks. Yeah, that's great. Cleaning is fantastic. Exactly. You can repair them yourself. I found my sewing machine with a sewing table at thrift store for 40 bucks. That is incredible. That's great. We're working on restoring a Singer 1912 model. Wow. Oh, definitely. Please make a video about that. Yep, and there's also a couple of channels on YouTube that show sewing machine restoration and what all the parts are because they're not that complicated. The older machines are really easy to figure out. I could clean and oil my Singer by myself. I didn't need a professional to do it. That's the beauty of it. Um, a modern machine, though, when it breaks, you have no idea. Is it something in the motherboard? Is it a computer chip thing? Is it an actual plastic part that's broken that you can't replace? I mean, yeah. My Singer is my great grandmother's. Oh, that's awesome. That is so special. That's the one regret I have about my dad's mom is that when she died, my pop gave away her sewing machine to somebody else and not me. And he knew I sewed, but he was like, "Well, it was old. I thought you wouldn't care about an old machine." I was like, "It was a Singer featherweight. I would have loved it, but you know, oh well." The only thing that's weird on the 19th century ones is the bullet bobbin. I don't even know what that is. That's new to me. You've stumped me. Do you mean the little bobbin piece that it comes out of the front and then you feed the bobbin in and you push it back in? Or is it a completely different bobbin shape? A few shops that sell replacement decals. So that's cool. Yeah. And that's the other thing is there's so many parts you can find now on eBay, on Etsy. So if you've lost a part for your machine, it's really easy to get. It's kind of like I bought a 1952 stove for the house that we live in. We live in a 1948 bungalow. And I found a 1952 gas stove. It's the love of my life. It's my favorite appliance ever. And I really did my research before buying it because I thought, well, what am I going to do if it breaks? You know, is anyone going to know how to fix it? And there are whole forums online dedicated to finding parts for the stoves. There are companies that make replacement parts for these stoves. There are people who are so dedicated to old stoves that you're not going to be in any trouble if you need a part. And it's the same for the old sewing machines. There are people out there who know how these things work and they know how to fix them and they have the parts for them. Vibrating shuttles are easy though. Looms. Oh, it looks like a tube. Wow, I've actually never seen that. Okay, I'm going to go look that up when I'm off this live stream because that's fascinating. A bullet bobbin that looks like a tube. Well, you know, those early machines, they're actually really small, and I don't think they ever actually thought far ahead to what we'd be doing with sewing machines now. The whole thing was just to get 2 layers of fabric stuck together. So they're very different from what we use now. Okay, well, this is fascinating. See, I've learned just as much from you guys. That's why I love these chats. And I've done a couple on Instagram, and the most fun thing is actually just talking to you and hearing your feedback and what you sew with and what you enjoy doing. Because I learn just as much and I find out new resources all the time. So anyway, my 1 hour time window is up. So I'm going to leave you for now and try to go finish my next YouTube video and get it uploaded. Hope you guys enjoy it. It's kind of manic, but I've taken all the pieces and parts and rearranged them multiple times until I think it makes more sense. We'll see. You can be the judge of that. But anyway, leave comments. I always love to hear. I think I'm allowed to save this to my channel. I've never done it, so I'm going to find out now. Oh, shame. You just caught the end of my live stream. Well, I will have to do this again. Older Singer I have is interchangeable with my electric machine. That's cool. That's another thing. The parts often are interchangeable on the old machines, which is fun. Hey, it was fun. I enjoyed it, and we'll definitely do it again. Everybody stay safe. I'm really not worried. I'm one of those people who's like, you know what? We should be doing all these protocols in flu season anyway. That's what our YMCA told us. They're like, you know what? All the hand washing and all the wiping down before and after using machines is something we should do throughout flu season no matter what. Because actually flu is going to kill more people this year than any virus in the world. So just think of others. We always want to protect those among us who are most susceptible, which is the very elderly and the immune compromised. So, you know, having to stay our distance and not go to large gatherings and do your shopping online, I think it's just something that we do to keep others safe, and it's a good thing to do. So while you're doing your quarantine and while you're home with your kids and while you're twiddling your thumbs, go find all the things to learn on YouTube. Go find all the things to make on Pinterest. Go shop all the little home businesses out there that are going to be hurting with the downturn in the economy, and keep making things because we need more beauty in the world and you're the one making it. So till next time, see ya. Thanks for joining the chat.